MSNBC senior White House reporter Vaughn Hilliard is following the president's trip from Seoul, South Korea. Henrietta Treyz is co-founder and director of economic policy at Veda Partners. Richard Stengel joins me here in studio. He worked under President Biden as Undersecretary of State for Public Diplomacy, and he is an MSNBC political analyst. Vaughn, I was where you are the first time in his first term. The president traveled there, but explain to me how much of this trip has been substance and how much has been style, at least so far.
Right. Well, how about this? I think the president's style, it's clear, is that he's got a lot of darts and he throws them at pretty much anywhere on the map they can hit, even if he's in that country or not. For example, while he was in Malaysia this weekend, he went on the attack against Mark Carney, the Canadian prime minister, calling off trade talks with Canada because of a television ad that the province of Ontario ran, quoting Ronald Reagan during the World Series game. Of course, Dodgers versus Blue Jays. That has anything but to do with the focus of his Asia trip. But you noted that he has made his way to Japan, where he is set to have a high-stakes meeting with Japan's new prime minister, who was named the first female prime minister of Japan just last week by their parliament. She, of course, is going to be going through the details of the $550 billion that Japan over the summer agreed to invest in the United States as part of their framework of a trade agreement over the summer. But then he's going to make his way to Korea, South Korea, where he's going to be meeting with their prime minister, with their president, as well. He has suggested that he believes that the U.S. and Korea are close to a trade agreement. But in Malaysia, it's worth noting that he touted what he was calling a peace agreement between Thailand and Cambodia. Of course, it is the framework of a peace deal that called for the demilitarization along a border that has been a long conflict point between the two countries. At the same time, the president said that the reason he was able to get that peace agreement, those two leaders in the same room, is because of his tariff policy. He touted his tariff policy and the willingness to put these high export rates on countries' goods coming into the United States for his ability to negotiate. And that includes with China, who he is set to meet with, the President Xi, this Wednesday night, U.S. time, in Busan, South Korea. This is going to be a meeting that Secretary Bessent, in Malaysia with U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer, met with their own counterparts to nail down sort of the initial talks and the framework of all of this. But of course, for the president, again, when we're talking about the darts and where he's looking at on the map, he even threw into the equation that he would be open to meeting with Kim Jong-un of North Korea and extending his trip. The North Koreans have not shown any desire to have that meeting, but for the American president, his focus is in quite a few different places here as he tries to advance what he believes is the America First cause here in Asia. Chris.
He always has a lot of balls that he's juggling in the air. So, Henrietta, let me play exactly what the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said about this framework for a U.S.-Chinese deal.
The president had given me maximum leverage when he threatened 100% tariffs if the Chinese imposed their rare earth global export controls. So I think we have averted that. We also agreed on substantial agriculture purchases for U.S. farmers. We agreed that the Chinese would begin to help us with the precursor chemicals for this terrible fentanyl epidemic that's ravaging our country. So I would say that it was a very good meeting overall.
So if you listen to Secretary Bessent, if all that comes to pass, it sounds like a win for the U.S., but what would constitute a win?
Yeah, the soybean part in particular is a very big deal. My latest understanding is that it looks like the president of the United States is preparing to take off some of the 20% tariffs on fentanyl that they imposed on China early on in the administration, and that in exchange, China will relent and start buying some of our soybeans again. Now, really importantly, President Trump walked back his own Treasury Secretary and said, hey, look, none of this is done until, the fat lady sings. And so there is an appropriate amount of temperance here to just make sure that once President Trump and President Xi get in the room, they actually do get a deal that results in tariffs coming down on fentanyl and soybeans getting sold to China. But we have a long way to go before now and then. And of course, China famously did not live up to its phase one trade deal reached during Trump's first term. So it's not just what's on paper, it's actually what actually gets done afterwards. Are they delivered? Do we actually start selling those soybeans, which is what U.S. farmers are desperately in need of?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the idea, Rick, is that if you greet the president with pomp and circumstance, I mean, he looked very happy. He was dancing, right? That at least puts him in the frame of mind to maybe get something accomplished. There he goes with his dancing. But is the question, even if they initially sort of get a good return on their investment, he looks happy, maybe when they have the conversations, he sounds happy. You never know because he can turn on a dime.
Yes, 100%. I mean, for decades, the U.S. has been a force of economic stability in Asia. All of those countries look to the U.S. like you have rational trade policies, you're combating China that's trying to, strong arm us. But now they look at the U.S. as a bastion of economic terrorism. There's no rhyme or reason to what these tariffs are. I mean, talking about the tariffs to China, how many different numbers have there been since Trump has been in office? Dozens and dozens. And as you say, he may turn on a dime. And the idea that we cover this in a way that seems to show that there's some rationality, I think, is a mistake. So a win is not you get yourself in a terrible situation and then you extricate yourself. Is that a win? That's what's happening all over the place here now. And so, these negotiations, President Xi doesn't make a decision when the two of them are together. He's made a decision beforehand. Trump feels like these world leaders are making decisions while they're sitting together. They're not. They're humoring him. So I hope there's a trade deal because the trade deal would repair the damage that Trump has done. But we'll see.
So Henrietta, the New York Times had a pretty great piece on the president's negotiating style. It said, and I'm going to quote it here, more than 9 months into his second term, the only thing predictable about Mr. Trump's handling of global affairs is that it will be an unpredictable mix of instinct, grievance, and ego. Foreign leaders and ambassadors know to remain wary at all times, with one saying the other day that he enters the Oval Office with the kind of caution needed if there were sticks of unexploded dynamite under the couch cushions. Are you hearing that over time, this is having a corrosive effect on our global economic relationships in the way that Rick points out and in other ways as well?
Absolutely. And the shocking part is that most of the bombast is with some of our closest trading partners and global allies. Take Canada, for example. You put up an advertisement with Ronald Reagan saying how he feels about tariffs, which is that he does not like them. And the president turns around and slaps a 10% tariff using this International Economic Emergency Powers Act authority on our closest ally, Canada. The same is what I understand happened with the deal with the Swiss. You were almost done. Everything was ready for a signature. One wrong word gets uttered in the Oval Office and boom, the whole deal is off the table. So that's the kind of dynamic we're seeing. And I'd also point out that it leads to the lack of conclusion on these deals. We have no South Korea deal. We have no deal with Vietnam. And we're getting these piecemeal indications with Malaysia, with Cambodia, that really what the president's tariff authority and plan is to permanently impose tariffs, if the Supreme Court will let him, on these nations, friends and allies alike, for as long as his administration will last. No getting this to zero, massive taxes on U.S. consumers.
The Canada thing is interesting, Rick, because he sees an ad, he doesn't like it. And next thing you know, we're in another, trade kerfuffle, maybe something worse than a kerfuffle. What's the big picture impact in your view?
I think the big picture impact is a lot of damage to what economists and global people call soft power, our reputation in the world. And I think Trump, because there is no rhyme or reason for what he does, where that television commercial can interrupt relations between what should be the two closest countries in the world. I thought that the excerpt from the New York Times story was really good. Some mixture of grievance, ego, and narcissism seems to inform everything he does. That is our policy, alas.
So let me go back, if I can, Vaughn. This is the first time a president has traveled abroad during a shutdown. It never happened before. Big picture. What are you hearing about this strategic decision to focus overseas while largely not really addressing the shutdown, not talking about the pain of the people that we've been hearing from here at home?
Right. The White House knew that he was set to leave on this nearly week-long trip to Asia, and it didn't change their posture at all in those closing days, saying that it is incumbent upon Democrats to be the one to reopen the government, and that the president would be willing to sign and move that CR forward if the Democrats so chose to. He has suggested, while he was making his way here to Asia, that he'd be happy to meet with Hakeem Jeffries, the House Minority Leader, upon his return to the U.S., but there has been no indication that they have any intent of changing their position. And I think it is important to note this morning, the largest federal employees union, the AFGE, here this morning, actually, their president in a new statement said that they believe that it is in the interest of federal workers to move forward with the clean resolution, as Republicans up on Capitol Hill and the White House has touted, suggesting that there are federal employees, hundreds of thousands of them, that are about to face even further financial consequences as a result of this shutdown. It is time to move forward. So this year for the White House, they have said all along that they are going to wait it out and play the long game, and the president was going to focus on the international stage, and that's so far exactly what he's done. And he still has not just these meetings in Japan in front of him, but also he'll be making his way to South Korea in that high-stakes meeting with President Xi.